In this video, we will discuss the problem theft at word bank. The problem says that the world's most successful thief was planning for his next heist on the word bank, and he decides to carry a sack with him. So basically, this guy is carrying a bag with him which can carry a maximum weight of c kgs, right? So the capacity of this particular bag is c kgs, and inside the word bank there are n larger blocks of gold, right? So there are n blocks of gold in this bank, and all the blocks have some profit value associated to them, right? So what it is saying is that since there are n blocks, right, there are n blocks in this particular bank and n blocks of gold are there, right? And the ith block, for the ith block you have a wi, that is the weight associated with that particular block, and you have the pi, that is the profit associated with that particular block, right? And what you have to do is, as blocks were heavy, so he decided to steal some part of them by cutting them with his cutter, right? So the thief does not like symmetry, so hence he wishes not to take the blocks or the parts of them which whose weight is perfect square, right? So the thief is saying is that the thief will not take all the blocks whose weight is a perfect square, right? So for all the blocks that are having the weight as perfect square, that will be not taken by the thief, right? Suppose if the weight is 36, so 36 is a perfect square because it is nothing but 6 into 6, right? So all these blocks will not be taken by the thief because they are perfect square, right? So for them you will not be considering them, right? And you now what you need to do is, now you need to find out the maximum profit that he can earn, given that he can only carry the blocks of gold in his sacks, and the answer should be decimal based, right? So let's try and understand this thing. Let's say if you have been given this particular data, or let's say for that matter if you have been given any data, right? So what you can say is that suppose that you have been given you have been given, let's say 3 blocks, right? Suppose that the n value for you is 3, and let's say what you have been given is, you have been given the w array, that is the weight array, and you have been given the profit array, right? Profit associated with the ith block. So let's say the weight you have been given as 6, let's say another weight, let's say you have been given as 25, let's say another weight that you have been given is let's say 7, right? And let's say we have been given another weight, let's say we have been given a weight as, let's say 8, right? If these weights are given to us, and corresponding to them, if we have also been given the profits, let's say the profit for this particular block is maybe, let's say 36, right? Let's say the profit associated with this block 25, let's say it can be, let's say 100, right? Let's say the profit associated with this block 7 is kind of let's say 56, right? And let's say the profit associated with this block 8 is, let's say 63, right? If these are the things, so first thing that you can observe is that the problem is saying that you will not be taking the blocks if like as the blocks, it is saying that he does not want to take the blocks, he does not like symmetry, and he does not want to take the blocks or the part of them that whose weight is a perfect square. So you will not be taking those blocks, right? So basically what will you do is, you will not consider this particular block with the weight 25, right? So if you are not considering this particular block with the weight 25, so what you can do is, basically you can mark the profit associated with it, you can mark it as 0, right? Because you will not be considering it, because if it's a perfect square weight, in that case you will not consider it, so you can mark its profit as 0 because you don't want to consider it, right? And it will be a waste for you, right? And then after that, how will you actually write? Let's suppose that you mark this as 0, right? Let's suppose that you mark this as 0, then there are several weights. So which parts of gold will you pick first? So you will be picking the gold by choosing in terms of the, like, you will see that what is the per unit profit, right? Per unit profit, you will see this part, per unit profit, right? So what is per unit profit? Basically you will see that how much per 1 kg of weight, let's say if it's in kilogram, so per 1 kg what is giving you the maximum profit? Let's say you can at most, let's say your capacity is 10 kg, right? So you will like to have those 10 kg of weights that will give you the maximum profit, right? And how will you choose it? So basically how can you determine the per unit profit? So you can say that per unit profit for the ith block, per unit profit for the ith block, right? Per unit profit for the ith block, right? It will be nothing but what? It will be nothing but P of I divided by W of I. You can get it through this thing, and you, since it can be in double format as well, it can be decimal. So you will have this as long double, right? And that is how you can do it. Now once you have this thing done, right? So let's say you have this thing done. So basically let's try and see what will happen, right? So for this, let's try and associate with this part, right? So let's try and see like what will be happen when P of like let's say P of I divided by W of I, right? So per unit profit, what will be actually? So per unit profit here, if you will try to observe, so if I have this value is 6, right? The weight is 6 and the profit is 36. So per unit profit will be nothing but 6 in this case. In this case, the per unit profit will be 6. In this case, since I have marked it as 0 because it's a perfect square weight, so I can mark it as 0 and its per unit profit can be, let's say, can be said to be 0. In this case, the per unit profit will be nothing but it will be something like 56 divided by 7, right? And that's going to be nothing but 7, right? So in this case, the per unit profit will be 7. If it was let's say 57, so, or let's say it was 58, so it will be 7 point something, right? 7 point what, 7.2 kind of thing, right? And apart from this, some other two more decimal places, right? After that, what will happen is you can see this part. For the last part, like 63 divided by 8, how much profit is it going to give you? So this will be what you know that if you do this thing, if you will try to calculate this thing, so how much it will be? So you know that 8 5s are 40, then 48, then 56, and then you know 64, right? So 8 8s are 64 is there, right? But it is just lesser than this, but it is a greater value, right? It is nothing but 7 point kind of this thing. Like if you divide this, so this will be 7, and then like this will go how many times? This will go 8 7s are 56, right? And then what will you have? You'll have this part, right? So you can see that 7. So basically it will be 7 point kind of 8 or 9 value, right? It is greater. So first of all, you will consider this value, the per unit profit according to this, then this, and then this, right? And then this. So basically you will check how you will consider it in terms of decreasing order of per unit profit, right? You will say that you will consider the blocks in terms of decreasing order of per unit profit, right? That's how you're going to consider it. So you will do what? You will store it in a pair. You will store correspondingly the profit per unit, right? Profit divided by W of I. You will consider this thing as the first part of the pair, and then another thing that you will consider is the weight associated with it, right? And that is how you will be considering it. And then what you will do is you will sort this particular vector of pairs, right? And after that you will start picking up. And if your capacity is always greater than 0, if your capacity is greater than 0, then in that case you will keep on picking, right? First of all, you will pick the one which is having the most profit per unit, right? You will first of all pick the block which is having the most per unit profit, and then you will pick the next blocks, right? Having lesser profits, right? Lesser per unit profit, right? That's how you're gonna do it. Let's try and quickly write the code for this particular approach that we have just discussed. So what I would be having is, as I said, I'll be having a vector of pairs, right? In the vector of pairs, what do I need to store? I need to store first of all long double. That will be nothing but that will be storing but nothing but the this thing, the per unit profit, right? And I'll have long for storing the weight. And let's say I mark this as let's say V, right? V as a vector V. After this part is done, so what I will say is that I need to iterate through this particular array. So I will say that int I starts from 0. I is going to be lesser than what? I is going to be lesser than n. I'll do I plus plus. After this, what I will say is that I'll have, let's say, a long temp in which I'll check what is the square root. So I'll say that square root of what? Square root of W of I, right? The current weight is square root. And then what I will say is that if it happens that temp that I've calculated, right? Or let's say instead of this temp, if I mark it as SQ, right? If I mark it as SQ square root, so if it happens that SQ into SQ is equal to W of I, then that means it's a perfect square, because if its square root is equal to its initial value, original value, in that case I can mark the profit for the ith block as 0 directly, right? That is what I can do. Why I can do this thing? Because suppose that if you give me a value, let's say 8, so 8, if I do the square root of 8, so what will I get? I'll get something like 2 point something, right? I'll get this thing. So if I multiply it with itself, so it will be lesser than 8, right? Because 2 point something into 2 point something will be lesser than 8, right? It will be this case. Let's say if like, but in this case, if I give you 9, so in that case the square root will be 3, and 3 into 3 will again give me 9. And in that case, I will say that I do not want to consider these things, right? If I give you, let's say, a value like 20, so in that case, if I do the square root, so if whatever I get through the under root, if I'm storing it in integer, right? So let's say if I, as I mentioned, like if I have 8, so if I take the under root of 8, so if I'm storing it in int, so sq will store only 2, and 2 into 2 is nothing but 4. It's not equal to 8, right? So that's why it will be considered, and all the perfect square blocks will not be considered, right? So what I will say is that in the v of I dot first, in the first parameter, what I will, and it has to be declared for all the n blocks, right? So v of I dot first, that is nothing but the profit per unit. It will be nothing but, I'll have to calculate it, it will be nothing but long double, right? Or I can say long double, right? I can say it as long double because I have to return in terms of long double, right? So I'll say this part here, and here also I need to change. So basically long double, like profit per unit will be what? It will be nothing but p of I, that's gonna be divided by wi, right? Pi divided by wi. The profit per unit weight I need to calculate, right? Per unit weight I need to calculate the profit, right? So that's how I'll calculate it. Let's say in this also I can typecast it to, let's say, long double, right? That is what I can do. And after this calculation is done, so what I can say is that v of I dot second, right? V of I dot second is nothing but the weight associated with it. I need to calculate the profit, right? I need to calculate the per unit profit, and I need to store the weight along with it, right? After this part is done, so basically what I am saying is you can sort this vector according to the, in the first value you have stored the per unit profit, right? And you will be sorting according to the decreasing value. So you'll say that v dot begin, right? You can say that v dot begin, comma, v dot n, right? You will sort it v dot begin, v dot n. So it will be first of all sorted in ascending order. Then what you can do is you can say that basically you can reverse, right? You can reverse this so that it becomes, either you can use greater end or you can do reverse, right? So first of all you can maybe sort it in ascending order, and then you can simply reverse this particular vector that is storing the per unit weight. And after you have reversed it, so what will happen, every pair will every pair that you will be considering from the starting, that will be having the maximum per unit profit, right? So that's how you will be considering. You need to be greedy, right? V dot begin and v dot end, sorry, this part, right? After this part is done, so what you will be doing is you will be iterating. So you will say that long double, let's say long double, let's say result is equal to 0. You'll mark your result as 0, and then what you will do is you will start iterating. So you'll say that while, let's say you will have what, you will, let's say, have a I that will be initialized to 0, and after this part is done, so what you will be having is you will be iterating while iterator is lesser than n, I is lesser than n, and the cost, right, the c value that you have, the capacity that you have, the capacity should be greater than 0, right? Only then you will be iterating. The I should be lesser than n, so you should not iterate through all the n pairs, right? After you have iterated through all the n pairs, then you will terminate. Or if the profit, if the capacity is greater than 0, then you will move, right? While you are filling the weights in your bag, so your capacity will keep on decreasing, right? After this you will say that long, let's say temp is equal to nothing but how many units I want to take. So I can take the minimum of the current capacity that I have, or the weights that is currently stored in the ith with respect to the ith block, what is the weight associated with it, because in this I have stored the weight, right? V of I dot second has stored the weight. So either I will take the weight that is my current capacity, or I will take the weight that is currently there. If either it can happen that my capacity is greater than the current weight V of I dot second, in that case I'll take the complete V of I dot second. Otherwise, if I am lesser, if my capacity is lesser, if let's say my capacity, let's say, is 3, and the total weight of this particular block is 4, then I can only take the 3 capacity, right? So I'll choose the minimum of the 2, right? After that, what I'll say is I'll say that result plus is equal to, I'll add in the result, I'll say that result plus is equal to nothing but long double, right? Result plus is equal to nothing but long double of what? Long double, nothing but this thing temp, that is the weight that I have calculated. Let's say if in fact I should mark it as the current weight. Let's say I mark it as current weight, right? Current weight that I have considered. So I should say that current weight into what? Into V of I dot first, right? That is the per unit profit, because whatever weight I am considering, into V of I dot first, right? That is nothing but the profit per unit weight, right? And then after that I'll say that C minus is equal to what? C minus is equal to current weight. So I'll decrease the current weight that I have taken from this particular thing. After this part is done, so I'll say that I plus plus, I'll move to the next weight, which is next block, right? I'll move to the next block. In the end, I'll simply return the result. Let's try and quickly compile this code and see if it works on the samples or not. It's giving me a compilation error. Let's try and see what compilation error are we getting. It's saying that I have declared it like this. Okay, so I should be doing this thing in the syntax. Let's try and compile this again and see if it works. Again, a compilation error is there. So it is saying that long double, so I should say double, right? And it is saying that p of yeah, this part. Let's try and compile it now and see if it has any issues. It should work on the samples at least. One more compilation error, we can change it, like I is lesser than capital N. This part I should have noticed. So I is lesser than capital N. Now I think vector of long int, I think now it should work. So we are getting the same expected output, 7.857, 7.857. Let's quickly submit this code. So you can see that it was able to pass all the 100 test cases. So talking about the time complexity of this particular approach, so the time complexity for this particular approach is going to be nothing but order of n log n, and the space complexity, since we are using a vector of pairs, so it will be order of n. Thank you for watching this video.